Welcome everybody to GoLocal Live. I'm Josh Fenton, CEO and co-founder. A little quick news before we go to Bolzano, Italy. First thing first is a number of the new hires in the revamped Providence School Department have very complex backgrounds. Take a look at that investigative piece, everything from sexual harassment to a bizarre case down in Florida of toe popping. I really don't want to know any more about that episode, but these are some of the people that the Providence School Department is bringing in. So take a look at that. Secondly, breaking late yesterday was in a very high-profile lawsuit that's functionally been going on for 20 years between Brown University and athletes there, women athletes, to reaffirm Title IX. The ACLU sent out emails that they had received in the discovery process in their lawsuit against the Ivy League institution, and there was lots of interesting emails between key members of the Brown Corporation, billionaires, and high-profile Wall Street executives and administrators at Brown relative to how they think the university should proceed relative to that Title IX case, functionally wanting to shift the, quote, anger and frustration from Brown University over to the federal court judge in one bizarre email. So take a look at that as well. Also, Trinity Rep has announced that they are not going to have live in-theater performance of A Christmas Carol. It's a critical component of their economic viability. It brings in over $1 million a year to that theater company. It generates about $4 million in business to downtown Providence. So a significant blow there. And of course, it's Friday, hot or not. Check that out as well. Let's go to Bolzano, Italy. Welcome, Rebecca Couto de Silva.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Okay, let's go to it. Numbers up substantially in Italy. Last week, you've sort of hit the red button of worry that cases had grown to be 800 per day. Yesterday, Italian officials announced that the number of one-day, 24-hour reports was over 1,400 cases. Talk a little bit about what your impression is and how people are reacting to that. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Yeah, so people don't seem all that concerned. I believe that the number, in English it's referred to as R naught, is still below 1, so 0.75, it's getting there. But there's this sort of it's funny because you see these big numbers and then you see people just with this very ho-hum attitude, like, yeah, no worries, we're below 1. And you hear a couple people saying, hey, we're going to look like France and Germany in a couple weeks. This is something that we should be more serious about. At the current time, there's just a lot of, I don't know if it's rose-colored glasses or it's just a rosy world. But there's just a lot of, okay, schools are going to open and, we're going to keep up our measures. And all of this is happening because people are coming back from vacation, but we've got it under control here. So, again, it's in 3 weeks. We'll see if that's true. I tend to be more on the side of, no, this is really ballooning. But I'm always, looking ahead 2 weeks, and then maybe I'm right.
Yeah, no, listen, those numbers are going up. A few weeks ago, they were 200 to 300 a day. Now you're talking 1,400. The other thing that was interesting, of the 1,400 plus cases, 286 of them were in Lombardia, but also 50 of them were way down in Sicily. So it appears that it's hitting the entire country. Simultaneously, you're seeing substantial growth in the number of new cases. Are Italian officials talking about that?
Yeah, so there's, the back and forth between Rome and Sicily. Oh, no, you're bringing it here. No, you're bringing it here. What we're hearing a lot is people returning from other countries are bringing it back with them. So one day you'll read over, you see this many new positives, this percent is people returning from overseas.
Listen, everybody blames everyone else, right? In Rhode Island, we blame tourists coming in or from people from visiting the state. Massachusetts is barring Rhode Islanders from coming in. It's never anyone's actual inability to manage the virus. It's always somebody else's. But these new cases in Italy show that it's an outbreak, really an increased number of cases. It's not just regional, kind of like the first outbreak back in March, which hit the northern part, western part of the country the hardest. This case, there's hot spots all over.
Yeah, and they actually have their eyes on something like 50 hotspots. I'm like, when does it stop becoming 50 hotspots and just another countrywide thing again? But, one thing you can say, oh, well, we've got, excuse me, 1,400 new cases and 60% of them are from overseas. Okay, that means that almost half of them, so let's say 600 of them, are community transmission, which is a lot more than you saw a few weeks ago. So, there's that, you can have that focus on being overseas, but it's still a much higher community transmission than we saw even a month ago.
So that 1,400, is there any announcements yet on any impact to commerce, to closing down restaurants, to affecting schools reopening in a couple weeks?
Yeah, a hotspot is going to be perhaps treated differently. Right now, schools are set to reopen. So I gave you some updates on the German language schools here. They have their system of lights. And then there's the Italian language schools. One thing that's actually a shame, and I hope goes in reverse when coronavirus is over, is that seating used to be very communal, at least 2 kids at, I guess, a bench. And now they're having to break up all the seating, which is kind of sad in terms of, this is where Maria Montessori came from. It's not necessarily this pod learning that you see in other places, but it's becoming that because of social distancing. But, instead of schools might close down, what you're seeing in the newspaper is individual stations delivered to this community, right? So everything is just the attitude and what's being said is very much moving forward, under control. And so that's what's happening as of now. Olympia is going to start school on the 7th. Kids here in this province will start on the 7th. Other kids will start on the 14th. And people will return to work as normal under the new rules. We'll see if our community spread or our numbers get high enough, what happens.
I mean, Italy is a lot like in many cases, like a densely urban American city. People have a tendency to live vertically in apartments, and the older the city and the older the construction, the even more quaint, more compressed. Is there worry about, a big outbreak in Venice where everyone is crammed in together, or in Rome, or in Florence, or some of Milan, some of the bigger cities?
Yeah, right now, I think everyone wants to finish their vacation.
The Italian way, right? It's August.
Yeah.
You can't possibly think about a pandemic. It's August.
Right, exactly. But like last week, there was really bad flooding in Merano, which is close to here, and Verona. I mean, up to people's chest. You saw people just their necks and the porticos or whatever, and it's like, wow, that is that's high water. And that's a big concern. I believe that our sort of storm season Venice's storm season is coming, in terms of those little hurricane-like, much less strong hurricane-like little twisters, I think, are sort of an October thing here. So the urban density is one. The sort of flooding right now could be another trigger. And, we don't have the same type of zoning. So you've got people living on top of shops here. So we'll see. I mean, it's one of those things that as I've been saying, I think that the ideal time to be sick, no one ever wants to be sick. the ideal time to be sick is the summer because everyone's going to be crammed into the same space in the fall. And one thing that they're saying now is they want to increase the flu vaccination, especially in kids, because you don't know what's flu and what's COVID.
Right.
And so a lot of kids who might have been able to just tough it out and go to school in the past won't be allowed to for good reason. And so you're going to see a lot of kids missing a lot of school. But, obviously if flu season is coming, then the chance of having two things at once is coming. And, people are returning to this high density situation that you pointed out. I do think that it's going to be, that we're going to see some very unpleasant results. And I really hope that people continue to take precautions in the fall.
Yeah, we've been writing about it here and reporting on it, on that very issue, the need to increase flu shot vaccination rates. Generally in Rhode Island, it's only in the high 30%. The state of Rhode Island has purchased enough dosages for about 680,000 out of the 1 million that will need to be vaccinated. That's still not enough, although there's third-party dosage supplies as well. But that's a critical part because, listen, in the old days, you get the flu, you went to the emergency room, you might even get checked in. Sometimes hospitals here in Rhode Island would get overwhelmed depending on when the flu season hit and how much flu there was within the community. So I'm sure that's a great concern in Italy as well. Answer me this, sort of as a follow-up final question, is what's the overall sort of tone in Europe? Italy's had this sort of love-hate relationship with the rest of the EU, depending on the quarter, the year, the week, the second. What's the sense of what's coming this winter?
Yeah, right now I think there's a sense of, well, it's getting out of control in other countries and not here. So we're doing very well, we're managing. Again, we've got an election coming, so there's a lot of, one of the biggest issues right now is immigration, which is a huge, huge issue with the EU because the EU rules are just not realistic with countries like Italy and Greece. There's this rule that you have to stay in the first place that you were processed. And in 2007, the pace of processing in Greece was such that it would take 200 years to process everybody. Right. So, yeah, immigration is one of our biggest issues. Unfortunately, it gets very reduced into an issue of anti-immigrant sentiment gets very high. But the problem is that it's unlikely that Northern European countries will say, yes, send everybody here right now. Because there is this stereotype going around that immigrants are bringing COVID, which I think if you look at the testing numbers is not borne out, but that's the narrative. And I think that right now Italy is really focused on this election, and we're going to see, how all of that goes. But it's another thing too, is that when people do arrive here on boats, they're not necessarily in socially distanced conditions.
Yeah,
so all it takes is one person, and you do get an outbreak in that group.
When is the election there? Obviously, as you know, the first week in November. When are the Italian elections?
I can look that up really quick, but I don't know. All I see is just so much advertising for it. I'm not able to vote.
Yeah, so. That's what I was going to ask. You're not able to vote, right? So, listen, I want to thank you as always for checking in. I think it's, the virus is most everywhere. I'm not sure if you stayed up late and watched the president's speech last night. I guess it would have been on at about 4 o'clock in the morning, so maybe you got up early. But that was an intriguing 70-minute presentation by the president at the White House.
Yeah.
Very unusual presentation. About 1,000 to 1,500 guests in attendance, and maybe 1% of them were wearing masks. There was no social distancing. So a very, very interesting evening there at the White House. But thank you so much. For everybody else, We'll be back at 12 noon with Dr. Michael Fine. Obviously, he had some strong language yesterday on how the testing data is being reported and is raising real concerns about the inclusion of inbound college students being included in the daily baseline number to be able to do analysis and find out what the impact of the disease is. Maybe the only good news that's really broken is the governor seems to have developed a proper testing structure now with 2 outside vendors. Most people appear to be getting their test results within 48 to 72 hours. So that is one piece of good news here in Rhode Island. For everybody else, thank you so much. Rebecca, thank you for joining us. And everyone, please stay safe and wear your mask. Thank you.